Hello World History A students with National University Academy. It's Mr. Goyette here. Just wanted to go over with you really quickly about a few things about the Armenian Massacre. I know you've been following along in your textbook for our discussion of World War I, and like your U.S. history textbooks where they might talk about the Jacksonian era and kind of pass over the Trail of Tears a little bit or have a little side note on it, sometimes the Armenian Genocide or the Armenian Massacre is not given the prominence that it should have in history. Now it is a controversial topic for those in Turkey and for the Turkish government because it's not something that they want to go around wearing as a bumper sticker on their flag because it's not a very proud moment in their history. So just like many Americans, you don't see people going around going, hey, how about that USA? Let's talk about the Trail of Tears. So understandably, we can see why some nations don't put that in the forefront of their textbooks. However, our textbooks here in the United States have done a better job of covering the Trail of Tears over the last 20 years. You can actually see an evolution of that. But what I want to go in, let's focus in on the Armenian Massacre. And in your textbook, if you've been following along in chapter 13 in the original textbook, chapter 29 in the new textbook, new text on page 844. I'm going to go ahead and read the little sidebar there that does cover the Armenian Massacre since they don't spend a little time on it, and I'll read it for you. The Armenian Massacre. One group in southeastern Europe that suffered greatly for its independent efforts was the Armenians. By the 1880s, the roughly 2.5 million Armenians in the Ottoman Empire had begun to demand their freedom. As a result, relations between the groups and Turkish rulers grew strained. Throughout the 1890s, Turkish troops killed tens of thousands of Armenians. When World War I erupted in 1914, the Armenians pledged their support to the Turks. Enemies in support, the Turkish government deported nearly 2 million Armenians. Along the way, more than 600,000 died. You'll see estimates on the internet and other sources that put it at 1.5 million. Some died of starvation or were killed by the Turkish soldiers. It was a very brutal period. So the reason the Armenian Massacre is an important historical event is obviously going to be covered in the Peter Jennings piece that you're going to watch on the website and some of the other pieces you're going to read about the Armenian Genocide. But the reason it's important as setting a precedent, as being an example of something that happened that's going to be important for the future, is that when Hitler begins the Holocaust, he actually makes reference to the Armenian Genocide and says something along the lines of nobody remembers the massacre of the Armenians, so we can get away with the genocide we're about to go forward with of the Jews. Now, of course, the word genocide is not a word that would have been used much at that time. Raphael Lemkin or Morgenthau, I can't remember which, went to the UN and pushed this word through in trying to get people to realize that whole generations of entire cultures, entire ethnic groups were being annihilated by, in this case, Hitler. Now we see the Rwandan genocide in the 1990s, and most recently the war in the Congo and the genocidal actions of Bashir's government in Sudan. In Sudan, the genocide there that is occurring, where the animist black Africans are being attacked by groups that are most aligned with the government. And again, I don't want to say outright that it's clearly Muslims against the animists, because it's not that clear cut. In fact, there are many Muslims who are affiliated with the government that are killing other Muslims that happen to live in these regions that they want to be overrun and totally wiped out. So it's really not a Muslim on animist war purely. It's more, we want this land, and whoever's on it we're going to kill. Those people are the people that once inhabited the Darfur region. Similar things were happening in the south during the Reagan era, where the war in southern Sudan saw the Dinka tribe and others being driven out of the south. So the area of Sudan has been suffering because of its oil wealth and resources, as countries like China and the United States kind of fight over who's going to get those resources, and the government tries to take those lands over so they can dole out those resources. A few books that you might want to look into if you're interested in doing something about the situation in Darfur. This book, They Poured Fire on Us from the Sky, is excellent, and it's actually written by Benson Deng, Benjamin Hajak, with help of Judy Bernstein. And I've met Judy Bernstein. I've had the pleasure of meeting her a couple times. Wonderful woman who helped work with the kids when they came over. This was during the Reagan era, and she's a wonderful person to talk to. She actually came out and spoke to one of my classes a couple of years back, and I saw her at the World Link Forum most recently this last year in 2008. For the Darfur Diaries, this is also a good one. I know Cheadle, Brian Cheadle? I'm forgetting the actor's name. Derek Cheadle, I forget, but he was in, of course, the movie on Rwanda, Hotel Rwanda. If you would take the time to watch that, I'd recommend it. Also, any movie on Romeo Dallaire. He was the UN commander of the troops. He's actually a Canadian general who was in command of the troops in Rwanda and tried to do what he could to quell the situation in Rwanda, but was in a very untenable and horrible human tragedy and human loss there. Something that could have been dealt with by the international community, by the United States and other countries, that was overlooked. Okay, so that's really our discussion of kind of some of the more recent genocides that you can do something about if you want to get off the couch. The massive and deliberate killing of Armenian civilians by Ottoman Turks, now going back to the Armenian Genocide, or the Armenian Massacre, as it's referred to in your textbook on page 844. As the Ottomans attempted to reform society in hope of preventing the empire's collapse, nationalism increased. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with nationalism, but nationalism can turn into a kind of blind hatred of immigrants. It can turn into a blind hatred of other people from other countries, or other countries in general. With an increase in nationalism, the government, which historically had been tolerant of many other religions — now remember, the Ottoman Empire and the earlier Muslim empires had the millet system, exceptionally tolerant traditions in the Muslim world of accepting Christians and Jews. Now, obviously, they had their dark eras, and this being one of their darkest periods. Had been tolerant of many religions and ethnic groups living in the empire, began to distrust its citizens. In the 1890s, the Turks targeted Christian Armenians, believing that they were supportive of Russia and no longer loyal to the empire. Genocide ensued, and millions of Armenians were killed over the 25-year period. Now notice it says millions of Armenians were killed. Your textbook is more cautious. Actually, it does say 2.5 million people dying. It says along the way 600,000 were starved, so that's the aftermath of those leaving the country. So it looks well up to 2.5 million people died in the massacre. The reason the word genocide is important is because it's deliberate, systematic, very intent methods of eliminating an entire ethnic group. And of course we see it in its most horribly articulated sense when, or most horribly actualized sense, when we see Hitler try to kill off the Jews in Germany in the late 1930s and 1940s. So I'm going to stop it here, since that's about all we have time for the Armenian Genocide right now. Please talk to me about it in class. I'd really like to hear your feedback and your own understanding of the situation, and I'd love to discuss it with you. It is something that is happening around the world today, so if you want to talk about Darfur, I'd be more than happy to do that as well. Thank you, and have a great day. Bye.